This is going to be super scientific. Our body is like a bag of chemicals. So if we're stuck in a space that feels overwhelming, our thoughts are circling on a mistake we've made, or we're worried about the future, or our body's feeling really uncomfortable, we want to shake that bag of chemicals up. So it's getting our body up and moving. And so I think it's moving out into space, getting outside, turning off our phone, not having earbuds in, but going on, I'm going to call it like a gratitude walk. So I'm going to go out wherever I am, in a city, on a farm, in my neighborhood that I might have walked 1,000 times before, and I'm going to open myself up to the senses that are around me as I move. What are some of the things that my eyes are drawn towards? And I always like to find one thing that I might not have noticed before that feels like it's like giving me a little message of hope or inspiration. And so I search the surroundings. I'm looking for that little message of hope or inspiration. I might listen to the sounds that are really far away from me and maybe coming closer, but the things that I might not have really noticed had I not been really opening up my ears to hear things. Are there some smells as I'm walking, the smell of earth, or maybe it's a scent of a blossom on the wind, but what are those things I smell? There might be a taste if you're extra in tune with yourself, and always coming back home. What do I feel in my body as I'm moving in this way? And it might be, whoa, I'm feeling really sad, or I'm exhausted, or I feel like I can manage things. But all of that stuff is good information, and it's shaking up the bag of chemicals, and just check in with how you feel when you get home. It could be a 5-minute gratitude walk, but am I still stuck in that thinking loop? Am I maybe a little bit more settled in my body? And just notice that.
Yeah, I guess like another strategy that I might recommend to people is like trying to find some things that that sort of ground them to the present moment. So for some people that might be like a particular smell. Okay, well, you know, go buy some essential oils that smell like that. Keep that around with you. You know, for other people, something that might keep them really grounded is maybe like a particular sensation or something. So, you know, throwing something in your pocket, like a, you know, smooth rock would be sort of like the stereotypical example of that, right? So.
My favorite tip when it comes to anxiety is very simple. It's all going to come down to focusing on the breath. As someone that's spent a long time and will be pretty much studying this for life, really looking at mindfulness meditation, the most important thing that I've learned through that journey is to really be able to come back to the breath when life gets tough. One simple way to really begin to think about focusing on the breath, if you feel anxiety building, is to just simply close your eyes and count to 10, deep breath in, deep breath out, and just focus on the sensations of what is going on in your body. It can be really calming to just focus on that one thing amongst everything that's slewing, really sort of overwhelming in your brain. Just come back to the breath.
When I feel anxious, the first things that I do are, well, I do journal, but it kind of depends on the situation I'm in. So I'm a huge fan of yelling in my car. It's one of those things where you just let it out and the music can be up, and so no one knows that I'm just letting that anxious energy out. If I can, I really like to lift heavy things. It just lets out that anxious energy for me. And if I'm in a situation where I can't kind of get out and move and let out that energy, I play with fidget toys. So if I'm in a meeting or in a session where I have to sit still, I will have something that I can sort of fiddle with in my hands, and that really helps to kind of ground me in the anxious energy. I would say one of the top tips that I use with my clients is making sure that you're eating consistently throughout the day and eating enough. So we often talk about how people experience being hangry when you've gone too long without eating. Well, that's only one end of the spectrum. There is a huge population of people who, when they haven't eaten for an extended period of time, they get anxious. And so that's the time where all of a sudden making a decision about food gets really hard. And so we can wipe that out completely just by making sure that we are eating consistently enough and eating enough.
When someone's having an anxiety or a panic attack, this is what I would suggest. So you want to tell the person to put their feet firmly on the floor and tell them to feel grounded, feel the power of the ground beneath them, and to place their hands firmly on their legs or a table if there's a table close by, and tell them to feel grounded. You want to talk in a tone that is soft, slower, and relaxed. You can't let yourself get anxious as well in that moment. And you want to remind them to breathe. So have them be grounded and then say, just breathe. Breathe in with me, breathe out with me. Remind them where they are. You're in your room, you're safe, you're with me. Breathe in, breathe out. And just remind them that they're safe and they're calm. And as they breathe in and out with you, you'll help them to slow down that physiological response that's happening, and it will help the anxiety to dissipate.
A strategy that I like to use to emotionally regulate is diaphragmatic breathing. There's a lot of different ways to breathe. I'm going to show you the way that works for me and a little bit of the science behind it. So when we normally breathe, we tend to breathe from our chest. So if you notice the hand on my chest when I breathe in, goes out. That's not a very effective way to breathe, and in fact, if you've ever seen someone have a panic attack or hyperventilate, they're breathing from their chest region. So a better way to breathe is with the diaphragm. That's why we call it diaphragmatic breathing. There's a muscle called the diaphragm, and it sits about here. It's a long muscle, and there's a nerve called the vagus nerve that attaches to it, and that nerve runs to our brain. The vagus nerve is a chill-out nerve. So its job, when it is stimulated, sends a signal to the brain, and then the brain causes the body to relax. What's happening is the brain is activating the parasympathetic system, which is our chillax system. So the interesting thing is the only way for the vagus nerve to be stimulated is when it's stretched like an elastic band. So if one hand is on my diaphragm, one hand on my chest, Buddha belly. So that's not our stomach going out, it's actually our muscle, the diaphragm, expanding. And so when you do that, and you just relax your stomach, and you do that for all of 30 seconds, you're stimulating the brain and causing a really beautiful relaxation response. A couple extra tips. One, you want to do this at a natural, even pace for yourself. Some people say in through your nose, out through your mouth, hold for 10 seconds. It really doesn't matter to me. All that matters is that you allow yourself to breathe easily and comfortably with whatever way works for you. Lastly, if your exhale can be longer than your inhale, that's advantageous as well to calm the parasympathetic system. And that's why when people are in private, they usually breathe in through their nose and out through their mouth, because it's much easier to have that exhale be longer. If you practice this and get really good at it, you can do it anywhere.
Okay, so let's talk about anxiety. This comes up a lot.
A lot, yeah.
What are some of the things that you like to kind of tell people about in terms of helping them manage their anxiety?
Yeah, well, I think for me, I mean, I'm not a trained therapist per se. I mean, I think I interact in therapeutic ways every day, but the things that I share are often the things I do myself that I find helpful for myself. So one of the things I find when I'm going through my day and I'm seeing, multiple people and there's multiple kind of crises that come up, I visualize a stop sign, and the stop sign represents stop, take a breath, observe how I'm feeling sort of from head to toe, and then proceed. And I know that this is, in in many mindfulness books and everything. So this is not something I created, but it definitely is something that helps me with my anxiety. Yeah. For yourself, is there something that you think of that you use on a daily basis or that you share with your patients and families to help with their anxiety?
Well, what does come up for me are little pauses, and similar to what you're saying, but these notions that we once described as kind of these micro-mindfulness moments. And I think what I like about them is that, you know, they're all around us. So even in a very, very busy day when we're going from one thing to the next, there's always these little breaks. So there's opportunities. You're in an elevator, you're waiting at a stop sign, you're in line somewhere, you're on hold somewhere. And sometimes those can create stress for us. But I use those moments now to help me regulate anxiety and worry. So it's almost a cue for me to just become very present in the moment. So I'm waiting, and instead of thinking, oh, how long is this going to take? I really try to take in my surroundings. So I look around, what am I seeing? What am I hearing? What am I smelling? Like the 5 senses, really trying to ground myself in the moment. And it's amazing how many times you can do that in a day when you're looking out for these opportunities.
Sounds so powerful, because not only is it helping with any anxiety, it's preventing that situation from causing anxiety.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah. Is there anything else?
Well, I think this is kind of a fun one, and I know that that there's a psychologist, her name's Amy Cuddy, and she sort of introduced this, but it's like that super person pose, you know? So if I'm about to go give a presentation or something that does cause me, you know, just some natural physiological anxiety, I'll get into that pose and I'll play a walk-up song, which for me is High Hopes, Panic at the Disco, and it just gets me, you know, it gets me feeling good, and sort of combats any sort of anxiety I might experience.
Well, it makes sense, right? Because it's a distraction, and also, like, so much of anxiety is when we're getting caught up thinking about the future. But if you can do something that brings you back to now, like, it can make a huge difference.
And there's nothing like music and being in your body that brings you out of that sort of panic or anxiety state.
So true.
Yeah.
One important tip that I've given my own children and some of the young people I work with is the one related to my lifestyle, and I'm talking about anxiety. How do I manage, and what do I think is helpful to manage anxiety? So I tell the kids or my young patients, I said, well, you need to eat well, you need to sleep well, and you need to be active. And they say, well, that's easy for you to say, you're a doctor already, so, you know, that's pretty simple. But if I can go back to basics, so when somebody shows up in emergency, the first thing we do is we do their vital signs, meaning heart rate, blood pressure, respiratory rate, and temperature. And if not, if they don't exist, they are dead. So my point about talking about so simple and simplistic, like eat well, sleep well, and be active, it is, in my opinion, the key to my success and success in dealing with anxiety.
So one of my favorite strategies that I use to manage my nerves, or if I'm having useless thoughts in my head that I need to control, is called the alphabet game. So I'm going to play it out loud with you so people can see how it's played, but know that you can play this game in your own head, so you can do it out in public or wherever you are. All right, to start the game, Sandrine, I want you to pick an object in the room. Any object, just tell me what you picked.
Camera.
Okay, so we're going to take the letter C, and we're going to go back and forth, and we're going to come up with nouns, objects that start with the letter C. We can't do repeats, okay?
Oh, goodness.
I'll go next. So, caterpillar.
Cat.
Clouds.
Chip.
Coconuts.
Sandrine.
Car.
It's
It's a hard game. Keep concentrating. You'll find something.
Cauliflower.
Ooh. Colors.
Chop.
Cornucopia.
Caliper.
Crayons.
Corn.
All right, that's the alphabet game. So let me explain why it works so well. It's actually been researched to help people fall asleep faster, people that are ruminating and overthinking in their heads. The reason it works so well is a couple things. One, our brain does not like to multitask. So when we're having a negative emotion or when we're having thoughts that are creating a negative emotion, it's that reptilian brain, our amygdala, our fight or flight response that's getting overactivated. So you probably noticed when we're playing this game, we had to think really hard, even though we have many C words in our brain. We had to think super hard, and so we're forcing our brain up here to our neocortex, our smart brain, and so when we throw this brain into high activity, our reptilian brain calms down. The other thing about the alphabet game is it doesn't let our brain make associations. Our brain loves to connect the dots. So even when that's a benign situation, such as I'm making a grocery list and I think about Mexico. Well, what my brain was doing in that moment, if I slowed it down, was grocery list, milk, pina coladas, beach, Mexico. But if we're having a negative experience, we can go down that rabbit hole really fast with our thoughts. So we're just coming up with random C words, which is hard enough on its own. If I was to ask you to come up with C words that are all connected to each other, we'd have a really difficult time. We wouldn't even be able to play the game. So that's the other great thing about the alphabet game. It doesn't let our brains start to connect these negative dots over and over and over again. So if you're out in public or you need to play the alphabet game and you don't want anyone to know that you're playing it, just imagine the image in your mind. So the last time I played this game, I was at the dentist's office and I was just didn't want to be there and really antsy. So I just imagined the object like cat in my head, and then I went to the next object, whether it was clouds. And so you can play it very easily in your own mind as well. And that's the alphabet game.
One strategy that I really like to use around managing anxiety is something that I can use for myself, but I also use with my kids. And we imagine that we're holding one of those dandelions that's turned to seed. And when I'm feeling really stressed, I notice that I take really short breaths and my kids take really short breaths. So we all practice taking a big breath in and blowing away all of those dandelion seeds. And there's one left. And then we pick as many as we need. And the neat thing about that is not only do we breathe, but we often start laughing together.
In terms of regulating emotions, I think one of the, may sound simple, but actually can be quite hard, is that idea of just knowing what we're dealing with. So when it comes to feeling out of control or feeling super distressed or anxious, often just knowing what emotion you're actually dealing with can sometimes be half the battle. It's like struggling with something but not knowing what you're struggling with, and if someone's able to help you identify or name that, then often we experience a sense of relief, even though we might still be struggling with pain or fear, but at least now we know what it is.